The wind slams the little hut, hard enough to make the wooden door shake. Inside, Aldric stands alone, breath rising as a faint cloud in the dark. This is the third night of the blizzard, and the cold is sliding straight through the timber walls. No family beside him, no shared warmth. Only one small bundle of firewood left, just like archaeology shows for poor medieval peasants. If the fire dies before midnight, the room could drop to -15, even -25. But with the old techniques archaeologists uncovered, Aldric still has a chance. Techniques that keep a man warm, even when modern homes lose power. And tonight, you'll see exactly how he does it. Aldric steps toward the corner of the hut, where a rough wooden frame lifts his straw bed off the frozen floor, nearly half a meter up. It doesn't look like much, just straw, bracken, and old timber, but in a night like this, it's the difference between holding warmth and losing it to the earth below, because the ground is a thief. Cold soil drains heat faster than a man can replace it, pulling warmth straight out of his bones. The village monk had warned him years ago. Never sleep on the ground. The earth takes more than it gives. So Aldric gets to work. He kneels beside the bed, adjusting the thick layers of straw and bracken, packed inside layers 20 to 25 centimeters deep, exactly like the archaeological finds in York and Warham Percy. The bracken underneath works like natural foam, springy, resistant to moisture, full of tiny spaces that trap air. Straw above it builds even more pockets, turning the whole bed into a primitive heat battery. Medieval technology, simple but brilliant. Aldric presses down with his boots, reshaping the mattress so the air chambers settle evenly. Each soft crunch of straw is a small promised warmth held in place instead of sinking into the frozen ground. And then the change begins. The cold stops biting his spine. The warmth lingers instead of leaking away. His breathing grows slower, deeper, steadier. One warm base, a foundation strong enough to outlast a storm. But Aldric knows better than to relax. Not on a night like this. He closes his eyes for just a moment, letting the faint warmth settle into his body, when a new blast of wind slams the hut, rattling the walls like an angry hand. The blizzard isn't finished, not even close, and if Aldric wants to make it to morning, he'll need the next technique just as much as this one. The fire in Aldric's hearth fades to a dull glow, barely more than a handful of embers. Outside, the blizzard throws itself against the hut like a wild animal. He has only a few sticks of firewood left, and he knows he can't burn them all tonight. Tomorrow will be colder, and a man alone has to think ahead. Then he remembers what the monks used to do in their winter sleeping rooms, warming stones until they held heat deep inside. Simple, silent, reliable. Aldric picks 3 round stones and lays them close to the embers, waiting as they darken and fill with heat. Archaeologists in Yorkshire found stones just like these, blackened from years of use. Proof that medieval families trusted this trick when wood was scarce. When the stones are ready, he wraps each one in rough cloth, just enough to protect his hands. He carries them to the straw bed and tucks them near his feet. 3 little pockets of warmth, each one able to radiate heat for 2, maybe 4 hours. Slow heat, steady heat, the kind that keeps a cold night from winning. And the payoff arrives fast. His feet warm up. The straw traps the rising heat. The air around his body softens. Enough warmth. But Aldric doesn't lie back. Not yet. He pushes himself upright, staring through the thin crack in the wooden door as the snow stacks higher. The wind has a new sound now, sharper, colder, like it's looking for a way in. And Aldric knows the next technique isn't just comfort, it's survival. Aldric pulls his thin linen tunic tighter against his chest, the fabric cold but still dry, clinging softly to his skin. That dryness matters. On a night like this, moisture is the enemy. And outside, the blizzard is pushing icy wind through every crack in the wooden walls, sharp enough to make a man wince with every gust. If Aldric sleeps in damp cloth or in fabric too thin, the cold won't just settle on his skin. It will crawl inward, slowly, relentlessly, until it reaches bone. But medieval peasants weren't guessing their way through winter. They understood a rule as old as the land itself. Linen close to the skin, wool on the outside. Not fashion, physics. Archaeologists from the Museum of London have found preserved linen fragments still shaped to fit tight against the torso, the inner layer. And Icelandic sagas describe thick wool cloaks built to trap air and turn wind aside. Two materials, two jobs, working together to make a shield. Aldric checks the linen first, brushing his fingers along the fabric to make sure it's dry enough to pull moisture away from his body. Dry linen creates tiny pockets of air, little insulators between warm skin and freezing air. It's light, simple, but clever. Then he grips the heavy wool cloak hanging over his shoulders, pulling it snug around his chest. Wool behaves differently. The fibers curl naturally, creating thousands of microgaps that trap heat. Modern outdoor brands brag about the same effect, but medieval peasants already knew the secret. Finally, Aldric takes a small strip of wool and wraps it around his neck, the spot where warmth escapes fastest, where even strong men underestimate how quickly cold can steal their strength. One layer to pull moisture, one layer to guard heat, one layer to survive the night, and the payoff comes almost instantly. The wind can't cut through the cloak anymore. His skin stops stinging like it did moments ago. The warmth stays where it belongs, inside not slipping away. Ancient principle. Even poor men understood nature better than we understand our thermostat. Aldric tightens the cloak once more, letting it seal the heat around his body. Then he tilts his head, listening to the floorboards tremble under another violent blast of wind. The hut shakes. Dust trickles down from the low roof. The blizzard still has its teeth bared, and Aldric knows deep in his chest that the next technique can't just add comfort, it has to fight back, or the storm will take the night. Aldric lifts his gaze toward the low thatch roof, barely 2 meters above his head. In any other season, it would feel cramped, almost suffocating. But tonight, that low ceiling is the closest thing he has to protection. Because heat rises, everybody knows that. But in a tall medieval house, that heat vanishes into the empty space overhead before a man can even feel it. Aldric has spent enough winters to understand this, and medieval peasants built with that truth in mind. They built low, they built tight, they built warm. Archaeologists studying Warham Percy York and old Scandinavian farmsteads found the same pattern again and again. Roofs packed with 30 to 50 centimeters of tightly layered thatch, reed straw, and grass stacked into thick mats long before anyone had ever heard the word insulation. Those roofs didn't just block snow and rain, they trapped heat, creating a warm zone, a tiny microclimate that hovered just a meter or two above the floor. It wasn't enough to heat an entire home, but it didn't need to be. It only needed to keep the people alive at the bottom. Aldric steps toward the warmest corner in his hut, the back side of the hearth wall where the roof dips even lower. That little dip matters. It squeezes heat downward, letting it pool around anyone smart enough to sleep beneath it. He drags his straw bed across the floor, inch by inch, the rough frame scraping softly against the wood. Even before he settles, he feels the difference. The cold air that once clawed at his skin seems slower here, dulled by the trapped warmth lingering under the thatch. The roof blocks the wind. The low ceiling holds the heat. The small space gathers every bit of warmth the night still allows. Aldric finally lowers himself onto the straw bed. The payoff is immediate. The air feels less brutal. The wind outside loses some of its bite. The warmth clings to him. One warm roof. It's not the big houses that stay warm. It's the clever ones. Then, without warning, a violent gust slams against the door. The hinges groan under the pressure. Dust drifts from the rafters as the whole structure shudders. The blizzard isn't backing down. Not tonight. Aldric tightens his cloak and listens to the wind gnaw at the walls. He's used every trick he knows. except the last one. And if he wants to see morning, that final technique has to hold. The hearth has almost faded out, only a few weak embers beating softly in the ash. Their glow barely warms the air above them, and the rest of the hut is filling fast with a creeping cold that wants everything still. But Aldric remembers one last truth passed down through generations of peasants who survived winters far worse than this. The wall beside the hearth stays warm, long after the fire dies. Archaeologists across England have proven it. Excavations reveal scorch marks on timber and soil baked dark behind old hearth walls, evidence that earth and wood stored heat for 2, sometimes 3 hours after the flames disappeared. A built-in heat battery, primitive but reliable, and tonight, Aldric needs it. He acts quickly. He drags his straw bed toward that wall, inch by inch, the wooden frame scraping across the floor. As he nears it, the air changes just slightly, but enough to tell him warmth still lingers there. He wraps his wool cloak tighter, sealing in what heat he has left. Then he turns his body so the wall's warmth presses straight into him, seeping through fabric and muscle sinking deeper. No roaring fire, no glowing stones, just a man, leaning into the last memory of heat his home still holds. And slowly the payoff comes. The wall is warm, the air loses its sharpness. His shivering stops, still alive. Sometimes warmth is just choosing the right thing to lean on. Aldric lowers himself onto the straw bed, exhaustion pulling at his eyelids. Outside, the blizzard hasn't softened. It claws at the hut, slamming snow against the door like something wild trying to break in. Wind screeches through the cracks, furious and hungry. But Aldric's breathing stays steady now. He has used every method he knows. The raised bed, the heated stones, the linen and wool, the low thatched roof. And now, the warm wall. The storm rages on, relentless and cold. But these ancient techniques, quiet and humble, hold the line. They keep one lone man alive in the dark, waiting for morning to come. In a world with no thermostat, no gas, no electric backup, what kept a man alive wasn't a roaring fire. It was a deeper kind of strength, knowledge, the kind Aldric carried into the storm. Morning comes slow. Aldric opens his eyes to a softer silence, the wind finally easing after its long night of fury. Thin rays slip through the thatch roof, lighting the little hut that somehow endured the blizzard's worst. He's still here, breathing, warm enough to rise. And the truth is simple. If a blizzard today cut the power all night, it's these old techniques, the ones our ancestors trusted, that would still keep us alive. Because on colder nights than this, they had even stronger methods. Methods most modern people have never heard of, but we will.